15,
Please.
14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8. Ignition sequence start. Launch commit. Liftoff. We have liftoff with Apollo 14.
Now for part 2, the exclusive interview with astronaut Edgar Mitchell in regards to what he has to say about Area 51 and a message for third phase of moon. Now let's get to the exclusive interview with Dr. Jandy Elias and myself asking Edgar Mitchell the questions. Apparently there was a ex-CIA agent that just came out with a deathbed confession that he worked with Eisenhower to find out what was going on in Area 51. Have you ever been in Area 51? Any knowledge of Area 51 at the time while you were working with NASA?
Well, I know of it, but I don't. It's very sketchy. I do not know it in detail. And I've flown over it many times when I was still in the Navy. But it has been the site for many years of the UFO activity, and perhaps the attempt to find out our own, develop our own activities into that. Now, I cannot say that I'm intimately familiar with Area 51 at all, but I've known some of the people that served there, and for example, Bob Lazar, I knew him quite well when he decided to reveal what he knew. But besides that, I'm not well informed on that.
Dr. Mitchell, we mentioned, of course, the citizen hearing, how you testified it. We've spoken to several of the witnesses, and of course the organizer, Stephen Bassett. And what Blake was just referring to, that gentleman with the CIA, was also one of the testimonies that they heard. During that 5 days, you had the 6 retired congressmen and senators who came in there, open minds but skeptics. At the end, all were convinced, and Senator Gravel has come forward now and says, this happened, there is a cover-up, and we are being engaged by an extraterrestrial race. And that's basically in a court of law. If you had such testimony of such evidence, this would win over, even if you had a criminal law case with such a higher burden of proof. What do you think the importance of having such a hearing is, and do you think that this will actually lead us to something more important, such as a UN meeting on this?
Of course, I think so. I know Steve Bassett well, and I did speak remotely through Skype at that conference, and I've talked with Bassett on many occasions. And yes, we're heading in that direction. Let me point out, our planet is not going to survive forever. Neither is our sun. We're going to have to, in due course, be out of here. And we're not on a sustainable path right now. So we have to get our act together if we're going to continue living on this planet. And that means we have to emulate the ETs and be able to go somewhere else. And developing the energy sources to do that and the technologies to do that is what it's really all about these days. And that's what I am involved in as much as I can be, is doing the research and the science to help us uncover how to do that.
Wow, absolutely fantastic. Do you think that our U.S. government is knowingly hiding secret information in regards to aliens, down craft? Do they have in their possession a flying saucer and alien beings?
Well, go back to the so-called Magic 12 organization. That's what its purpose was, to hold that information and to keep it under control. And there's many, many stories of how very knowledgeable people and very high-level people were denied access to this information along the road, including Barry Goldwater when he ran for president, and President Clinton's emissary, who was sent to Wright-Patterson and couldn't get any information about it. There is a long history here of I'll just call it a cabal because that's just the word that's used, that has control of this information, has kept everybody from knowing what they don't want them to know, and that is kind of around the world. However, many countries, including Britain and Belgium and France and Brazil and Mexico, have proceeded to open up their books completely. As far as I know, our country has not.
You know, Dr. Mitchell, you mentioned that this Majestic 12, and it was created by, I believe, Truman, and for basically the cover-up is in essence is what, as Stanton Friedman calls it, the cosmic Watergate, the truth embargo, as Stephen Bassett calls it. Through the Freedom of Information Act, there have been CIA documents going back to the 60s that actually admit to them ridiculing witnesses, covering up, making a cover up or a story of with a sighting to either discredit the witness or to say it was swamp gas or something like that. And these documents are now surfacing publicly and proving to people that obviously they knew something of this happening. What else do you know of them, of this cover up, and with regards to
No more than what I've just said.
Gotcha. Well, actually, go ahead, Blake.
Well, I know Edgar Mitchell he's a real busy man, and we really appreciate you coming on Third Phase of Moon and sharing your experiences and telling your stories and your knowledge about what's going on, your mission. Absolutely incredible. Mr. Edgar Mitchell, astronaut, third mission to the moon, sixth man to set foot on the moon. Absolutely fantastic. Thanks for joining us here at Third Phase of Moon. Any last words?
You bet. Been a pleasure.
Well, Dr. Mitchell, I do want to plug in. You have written to our good Third Phase of Moon friend Roger Lear. You have written a preface in his book, which will be coming shortly. And if you can give one final message to all the viewers of Third Phase of Moon, everybody out there listening, what they can do to help disclosure.
Well, I think much disclosure will take care of itself in due course. What I'm trying to get to our people, more importantly, is let's try to make this a sustainable civilization so we don't use up all of our renewable resources and burn up our planet before we need to. Let's try to keep it going for at least a few more centuries, which doesn't look like we're doing right now.
Let me ask you this. You know, it's been over 40 years since we've been to the moon. Obama says we're going to be going back. NASA's working on it. It's still taking a while. Would you ever consider, if, you know, it gets easier to go to the moon, to go back and visit it again?
Well, this is a little side story that kind of goes around with an amusing little anecdote. You remember when John Glenn went back into space after he'd had his early flight, and he'd been a senator and he'd been very prominent, and he went back into space at 77 years old. Now, I was only about 65 at that time. So John and all those guys, the early guys, were just a few years older than me. However, we sat on some boards together up at the Astronaut Scholarship Foundation, and one day over lunch a few years ago, I had lunch with John at the same table. And I said, John, there's a little story about it that you haven't heard, and I'll tell you. I said, when you went back into space, people started asking me, well, Edgar, don't you want to go back into space? And I said, well, of course, but I'm going to wait till I'm 100. John was only 77. Wait till I'm 100, beat John's record. That was a little humorous remark about all that many years.
Wow, we'd still look forward to seeing you explore the frontiers out there. Absolutely amazing. John?
Yes, you know, there's a law, a federal law that prohibits extraterrestrial contact, and I believe it was created by NASA, and the penalties could range as high as either a 5 to 10 year imprisonment plus a $10,000 fine. And there's also a staffer, a NASA staffer, that came out and said that her job is to airbrush photos of the moon, Mars, and other planetary bodies taken by NASA and airbrush out things like pyramids or other structures. What do you say with regards to the law? I mean, if they say there's no contact.
I'm not familiar with any of that, so I can't answer your question.
Certainly. What did you experience when you arrived on the moon? What did it feel like? Just tell us some of the detail in your way of what it's like to be on the moon.
Sure. Well, let me point out that we had practiced and practiced and practiced. There wasn't anything really unfamiliar to us that we hadn't done 100 times or more in the training areas at Cape Kennedy. So, and being well-qualified test pilots and all of us military pilots during at least either World War II, the Korean War, and then even later into the Vietnamese War. We were all pretty well qualified pilots. So going to the moon was just, I won't say it's a routine chore, but we tried to make it that by being so well prepared that nothing was really new, but it was new and exciting, except we were so well prepared that we went through the task one by one, like we've been doing them all our lives. And so, yes, it was exciting. We enjoyed it. We did a good job, but we certainly were well prepared because that's what we had trained on for a year or so before the flight.
Coming back from the moon, and then with all your experience and now all your studies into the phenomenon of possible extraterrestrial existence, what would you have to say to our third phase of moon viewers about, possible, finally, disclosure that we are not alone in the universe? Do you think it'll ever happen?
Of course. Sure, it will happen because we're not alone in the universe. And the folks, and they are very high-level folks, not just in our country, but everywhere. I think it's called a cabal of civilian people and perhaps governments that have tried very hard to keep this from becoming a talking point among the people, but it's becoming that anyhow, because the knowledge is out. Well-educated people are accepting the fact, the evidence. I don't want to say the fact, the evidence that said we've been visited, and I think some of the strongest evidence is that our missile silos that carried intercontinental missiles over the years between the 40s and the 60s were routinely visited by alien spacecraft, and the missiles disarmed. And most people know that. They were doing a great deal of effort to keep us from killing ourselves and each other at that level.
Gordon Cooper was a very big person who spoke about this. He even wrote a letter to the United Nations, and God bless his soul, he passed away. And I bet if he were here today, he would have also testified at the citizen hearing as yourself did.
I know he would, because Gordon and I served on Apollo 10 together. I knew him very, very well. And yes, we would agree on these points.
He saw a few objects once on Edwards Air Force Base when he was filming.
Well, he was a duty officer out at Edwards, and a UFO landed out there. He got pictures of it, sent it off to Washington, and never heard about it again.